Hello and welcome to the program. I am Suren. I'd like to talk to you about spirit communication and consciousness. Has by any chance love got anything to do with it? Love seems to be the only key to establish any meaningful communication with nature, as we all know. Animals, insects, plants, vegetable world, trees, fruits, flowers, and the essence of all things, namely the consciousness we all share as part of the cosmos and the universe. Is there anything as the universal consciousness that we may be tapping into? Are we any closer to understanding, without assumptions and guesses, what consciousness really is? That's a good question. Are we still talking about spirit consciousness or communication? Can communication take place with the dead? We all understand that the dead has no conscious awareness, right? You are then either communicating with the living or receiving recorded messages from afar, unless, of course, it is a theatrical act or just pretense. One other logical consideration points to the consciousness being able only to be expressed through the workings of the universal mediumship of the physical brain, with the capacity of expression, and is most certainly affected by the capacity of the equipment we may consider as the thinking part of the human being. As we all know, energy cannot be eliminated or destroyed, but it can change, or be changed, and expressed according to the need. Then, is that feasible to think a communication without the physical body can be made possible? That brings us to the subject of a possible design and designers. However, it is not my intention to create the impression of the idea of an almighty presence, as the world religiosity would prefer to consider. If those on power, even the chosen of the folk, being dependent on their accepted or generally liked features, such as a good football player, wrestler, fighter, and obviously a killer, perhaps, good looks, etc., the religious systems of humanity would not be as it had been affected as being observed today, thus giving life to control mechanisms of the devotional kind throughout the centuries of human existence, although more logical conclusions would have been achieved, but as it has been discovered by world's evolutionary history, thought and thinking ability of men has stagnated in devotional and nationalistic fervor. Back through the centuries, simple attempts has been with possible communication with the spirit remained, considered the insignificant value of Ouija boards and often laughed at methods of other kinds. If consciousness did not contain any imagination thereof, let alone the seemingly invented means by the so-called witches and warlocks of the past, there would be no signs of health-related, herbal, and eventually currently known medicine, let alone communication with forces of the unknown or the unknowable kind, sometimes renamed as the evil kind by the fearful clergy and the general religiosity. Let us work on these subjects a little deeper, shall we? Can we be all connected through the universal collective consciousness, if that is possible? We can always propose that there is one in the resource for the entire visible material universe, because modern sciences has proved that matter and energy are interchangeable. However, materials or forms are not necessarily stable, so they can be eliminated or even destroyed to release an equivalent amount of energy, as per the equation of E equals mc squared, and releasing, even transforming into new forms almost immediately. And this energy cannot be isolated, but can be studied. However, we need to use our imagination also. This energy source can project more forms of constant change. Let's keep that in mind. It appears to us as if the cosmos that we are familiar with and itself is part of our perceptions. However, from all the appearances, there are subjects which observe objects as a result of these frequency ranges. It is clear now that both of the apparent subjects and the objects have emerged from the same source. What we call consciousness is a common part with a very unique quality that makes it stand out as the subtlest manifestations of the vibrations or frequency ranges of that one energy source. It feels like light that does not appear to recognize any limitations or can be located in itself, nor it appears to recognize anything else or any field of perception, but appears to include the entire field of perception, just like holograms. Therefore, by logic, this energy source or light includes the entire universe as one smoothly running whole hologram. And the light shines on through all perceived mechanisms within the entire cosmos. Could this be likely to recognize itself somehow through perceptions and perceived mechanisms? Thus, we can see that we indeed perceive the entire creation within ourselves. Therefore, we could probably say, not necessarily, I'm thinking, therefore I am, but because this light recognizes itself through our perceptions, we feel as if perceiving the whole structure of the universe. Therefore, we can easily say, we are part of the universe and the universe is in us. Therefore, I am. Here's a question. Does the concept of universal consciousness reflect our experiences? It seems that the concept of universal consciousness comes up often. It certainly goes through a few different identifications, like the source, the light, creator, and so forth. This consciousness has been and will always be existed. It has no beginning or end, and we therefore are also eternal. And that we are part of the divine experience itself, if we may call it that way. And that we may need to return to this consciousness after passing on from the physical burden. Some anonymous participants had a few interesting questions about who had near-death experiences. One of them asked, "Did you receive any insight about whether our physical choices here on Earth, like having a special diet, which can truly change our lifespan?" Good question. This person was also wondering whether the illnesses, like cancer, was influenced primarily by people's lifestyle choices. Did the participant took part in a near-death experience? Do we have a set time to leave this earth? Or would our choices significantly alter that timing? This participant said that he is trying to find peace around himself, as how tightly one needs to control one's health decisions, that is, after a cancer diagnosis, and answer was quite easily made available by the one who said, "Our life plan includes several exit points, and many of them resulting in NDE. But," he also says, "and there are no exit points, and no mistakes either. Please do not ruin your precious time here, entertaining only worry or feeling like nothing is enough." Enjoy yourself and celebrate yourself. The world needs you happy. You deserve it and are worthy of peace now. Some people who had NDE were feeling they were everywhere at the same time. Its time is the same as it is here on Earth. Another one asking, "Are you really above, looking down, or were you right here in the coinciding body?" Somebody else who wrote after her experience that she knew she was somewhere else. "I was part of the universe," she says, "but very aware. I could see brilliance of many stars as I looked down and could see me and my husband laying in bed. We looked very tiny," she says, "and I felt a bit concerned and confused at first, but not scared. A voice in my head said it was not yet my time, and I drifted back into my body." One other wrote about his near-death experience. He wrote about his having had 2 near-death experiences. The first time it happened when he was 22, and he had drowned. He was extremely overweight before this event, but he lost weight. However, at the time, he sunk like a rock to the bottom. He saw a bright white light and had a complete conversation with the Almighty, apparently. Later, instantly, a bright silvery white light flashed, and I was back in my body and rescued by lifeguards. His second time happened was about a year later. After losing all that weight, he ended up in the hospital in a coma for 2 weeks. Apparently he had contracted a virus of an unknown origin, again experienced a bright white light, and this time he was at a doorway and was looking down and could see his body on the hospital bed, being worked on by the staff, while his mother and uncle being rushed out of the room. His attention went back to the doorway, and he could see what appeared to be a room. In this room were the countless numbers of relatives that had passed before him, most of whom he never had met, and when he came back, he asked about seeing the nurse who had on the hot pink jacket, because he wanted to thank her. That nurse was never in waiting room, and was down the hall and around the corner. None of them had any idea that he could have known that. This whole thing, said the clergy to him, that was all just a lack of oxygen in his brain and has never happened. Similar experiences have happened to many people when writing about their near-death experiences. And one reader said, I can see, I think many of us, especially when we view life only from a human vantage point without much spiritual reflection, consider love as a feeling. The more thoughtful ones among us see love as an action, even sacrifice, devotion, choosing others above oneself. Love is action, and he writes further, in the grand scheme of existence and higher dimensions of consciousness, it appears to be far more foundational than either of the feelings or behaviors. He explains that one of the reasons why he loves the mystical life is that many of the things he wrestles with internally or echoing in near-death experiences. Different people, different backgrounds, have the same wisdom in turn. Love is a force, very much like the gravity. He came to this realization while thinking about free will and universal reconciliation. When you follow those questions, he says, deeply enough, you begin to see that love is not merely emotional or ethical. It functions like a fundamental law of the universe. Now, gravity structures physical reality. Love structures conscious reality. It provides direction, meaning, and movement for sentient beings, navigating awareness. Everything eventually is accountable to the law. Love is not just something you feel. It is something all existence runs on. He further writes, one of the most striking consistencies of near-death experiences is this. People do not just feel loved. They perceive love as the environmental issue, as environment itself. And the experience is described like the wind, the light, the trees. Even the space around them is alive with the same presence. The love that emanates from what many may call the divine appears to radiate through everything. It is reported as tangible, almost energetic, not metaphorical. They speak of a divine field, a living atmosphere, where resistance itself communicates care, intelligence, and belonging. The surroundings are not neutral objects, but expressions of the same source. That makes sense. Love behaves less like an emotion and more like the fabric of reality. Not something to add to the experience, but what experience is made of. Can we then consider the Almighty as pure unconditional love? Not necessarily as a sentiment, but perhaps as a sense. If that would be the foundation of existence, then living outside the alignment with love naturally produces disorder, perhaps in the form of mental suffering and relational collapse. Meaninglessness, destructive behavior, perhaps as a consequence of misalignment with reality's deepest structure. NDE accounts reinforced this idea, while meaning describes a realm where your state remains transparent. Nothing is hidden. Who you are is experienced directly by others also. Movement through those realms often feels like moving closer to or further from the core of that loving presence, what some, like Dr. Eben Alexander, describes as the core. In that light, love behaves like gravity for the soul. Everybody in this world sees the effects or what is in everyone else. Movement towards the divine, or whatever we may consider it to be, which I prefer to call the universal consciousness, not necessarily the Almighty. And it is a kind not at all forced. It's like being drawn like the mass towards a center, and this is probably why one tends to lean towards a universal reconciliation, because ignorance limits the choice. Free will matures with understanding. If this universal consciousness is a reflection of perfect love in the presence of the source of your own being, any opposition eventually would suffer. Free will matures with understanding. There is something called the collective spiritual consciousness. Paracelsus says, all knowledge comes from the stars, the universal mind. Men do not invent or create ideas. The ideas exist, and men are able to grasp them. What is the purpose of universal consciousness then? Creativity. The mind certainly creates, alters, and the universe like an artist painting on a canvas, thus expressing its infinite potentials through finite stories. Suffering and enjoyment are just part of the palette. It's almost like the mind is indulging its creative whims at your expense. Does it need your tears? Self-knowledge. The universal consciousness needs finite perspectives to reflect on itself, like a mirror. Without altars, it may be blind to its own depths. An infinite mind, needing you to figure itself out, seems not necessary. It could just know itself without putting you through all the problems. Evolution. Same idealist suggests thus: the mind evolves and or defends through the experiences of its alters. It integrates their lessons, it becomes more. Does an infinite consciousness need to evolve? Does it need pain and suffering? Is there really a purpose, or is it simply what it does like? A fire that the universe expresses its being somehow in some ways. How communication with spirit work? or many as claimed that the spirits can reincarnate. How can we get messages from people who have passed when they now are living in a new life? All realities are inside the consciousness, or part of. All connections can be shared by your experience with others. You communicate with them, and I will throw your innocence, which every consciousness has, as its most basic method of communication. This may mean that you sit down quietly looking inwards. A sound or an image might show up. Whether the spirit has incarnated does not affect how you can obtain messages from it. In fact, it operates in a timeless manner. Time cannot be real, or at least the way we might think of it. It may be the density that stops everything from happening at once. But in reality, everything is happening at the same time. And so, we may be existing simultaneously with our past lives. That is probably why they affect our current lives. There is a movie which is highly recommended with the title of Everything, Everywhere, All at Once. One author says, the path goes to heaven when we transition. The part of that channel is taking directly, in fact it's talking to directly, is the spirit, otherwise known as the higher self. In my experience, spirits themselves do not reincarnate, but the soul does, he says. I imagine souls like the vessel that the spirit needs in order to become alive and to come to earth. It's like spirit, soul, physical body. That is why, says this person, that is able to communicate with spirits, but also not of the past lives. Spirits and souls are different concepts, but they work together. And spirit in the soul works to complete karmic lessons while they are inhabiting it. The last inhabitant, or my soul, he says, had a drinking problem. But in this life, I cannot drink for health reasons. The past life is influencing the lessons I complete for the soul now. And Philip Temple wrote about universal consciousness. He says, when we think about the flow of time, we see time passing day by day. We talk of the past, the present, and the future, and we talk of them happening in this order. The mathematics of current times care little for our linear ideas, and equally describe time flowing forwards as it does backwards. We can't even theorize the time as just another dimension, like space, and the flow of time, or passage of time, can be an illusion. That the past, present, and future exist simultaneously in a full-dimensional space. This view challenges our understanding that time flows from the past into the future, and thus our understanding of the structure of reality. This leads to the idea that we live in a block universe, for the past, present, and future coexist. When we linearly think of time and consider the idea of evolution of consciousness, where consciousness ultimately reaches this omega point, we are forced to imagine that this ultimate state of consciousness must have existed before in this block universe, and as always it has done so. This brings one back to the idea that there is a universal consciousness that exists even as we think about it right now. Time does not move, but mind does. It follows that time is part of how we look at the world, and at the flow of time is created by consciousness. Everything is consciousness. There are many ways for the universe to communicate with us. Can the universe be really talking to us, even right now? Probably it is trying to get our attention. It is probably trying to guide us, connect with us, and wake us up. There are plenty of signs out there, but we will be looking for them. Are we perhaps listening? And do we even know what to look for? Just think about it. How many times do you wish you had a sign for what direction you should take in life? How many times did you ask for an answer, but did not know how to receive it? How often do you feel alone and unsupported in life? When you are tuned in to how the universe is communicating with you, life becomes a lot less confusing, and you start to feel a lot more aligned and connected. However, since we live in a physical world, we also experience physical limitations. These physical limitations seem not to allow for Spirit to tap you on the shoulder and say, "Yes, I think you should take that job." Therefore, we have to pay attention to the more subtle and create ways for the Spirit to send us messages. If you are stuck in your head, wondering, overthinking, overanalyzing, rushing and being busy, judging and being angry, you are never going to realize when Spirit tries to get your attention. You have to be present, open, and willing to receive answers. Universal Spirit comes to us in the form of people. Believe it or not. Universe has a way of using people as vehicles to carry out certain messages. How? Well, through meeting a random person who perhaps tells you something or does something that sparks something within you, or trigger any of us into a deep knowing inside of you or of us, offer you an opportunity, getting a text or a phone call from someone, hearing a message on the radio, or overhearing a conversation. Think about it. Not everything you are hearing is a sign, but it may be a sign when you are specifically looking for an answer that may get answered by someone randomly telling you something that relates to your question. Imagine that you are driving to work and see a child holding a red balloon, says the author. And you get to work and someone got your co-worker red balloons for her birthday. Then, as you drive home, you see yet another red balloon on an open house sign. Do you think it may be a coincidence? Or is it a coincidence? Synchronicity is one of the most powerful ways that universe communicates with you. And sometimes you don't even have to read deep into the issue of synchronicity. It's just a matter of recognizing that there is something way bigger happening behind the scenes. Seeing a certain pattern or sequence of numbers, such as unlicensed plates, or coming across the same number or number pattern, such as in an address or phone number or seeing the night time, etc., can all have hidden meanings. As you interpret, have you ever noticed a random song popping into your head, or a certain song come on the radio, or hearing someone who passes by singing a song? Pay attention to the specific lyrics that you hear, as there can be a message in there for you. You see what I mean? You may have a thought pop into your head out of nowhere, out of the blue. You can hear a random idea, a solution to a problem, or something you feel inspired to do. A sign can be a literal one, with words or pictures on it, like a road sign, billboard, or Instagram post trying to relay to you a message. Do you keep having these same dreams over and over again? What are they about? Are you seeing the same person all the time? Visiting the same places? Having the same types of experiences? Look into the meaning of dreams to see what it can mean. Physical pain symptoms, ailments, and the diseases are all ways that the universe communicates to you that there is something wrong. Your lifestyle and habits can be causing a problem, such as pain in your back from sitting too much. This can be a sign that you need to change your lifestyle and start being more active. Went out but discovered it was nowhere in particular. Your flight gets delayed. Your interview gets cancelled. You get sick. Life might be trying to nudge you in a different direction. There are times in life when it seems like everything is falling apart. And just when you thought life couldn't get worse, it does. Your car breaks down. Your roof starts leaking. You lose your job. Your kid gets into a fight. Your partner breaks up with you. Or someone you love dies. Oftentimes, when everything in your life fails apart, it's an invitation to learn to let go and to learn to detach from the world of form. Sometimes the opposite of everything happens. Like not falling apart, not here you are feeling inspired, feeling good, you are in the zone, opportunities are showing up left and right. Your desires are manifesting. You are feeling connected and aligned. Things just work out somehow, and there is a sense of flow in your life. This is a beautiful sign that you are aligned with your truth and that you are on the right path. Think about that also. When you are in a state of presence and you go with it within to connect with yourself, great wisdom gets unlocked. This happens to floodgates to open, for spirit to communicate with you so that you can receive signs, guidance, and answers to your queries. You may know deep down inside that you should quit drinking, for instance, drinking alcohol, and live a healthy lifestyle, for instance. All of a sudden, you visit your best friend, and he or she says he just gave up drinking. Your brother and or his wife are starting a new phase of no drinking tomorrow, and your coworker is telling you how great he feels from not drinking for a whole year. These are all clear signs from the universe that says you should definitely give up drinking and focus on your health. There is always a beautiful order and timing to everything. Trust in that. And lastly, don't forget that you are a universal spirit. It is the essence of who you are. It's your own self guiding you to where you are supposed to be. There are beautiful articles on love in Popular Mechanics with the title, "Your Consciousness Can Connect with the Whole Universe." Groundbreaking research suggests this is a breakthrough about the architecture of consciousness. It supports a Nobel Prize with a theory about how quantum physics works in your brain. An experiment in which anesthesia was administered to laboratory rats has convinced scientists that tiny structures in the rodents were responsible for the experience of consciousness. It continues today. To pull it off, these microscopic hollow tubular structures, called microtubules, don't rely on our everyday flavors of classical physics. Instead, experts believe microtubules perform incredible operations in the quantum realm. Citing the work of earlier researchers studying them at the same kind of quantum operations are considered as being likely to happen in human brains. During rat brain experiments, scientists used anesthesia and maintained unconsciousness for medical procedures. One group of drugged rats also received microstabilizing drugs, while the others did not. The research is discovered that the microtubule stabilizing molecules kept the rats conscious for longer than the non-stabilized rats, which more quickly lost their reflex or the ability to restore normal postures, according to their findings, published in the peer-reviewed journal in Neuro in August 2024. In quantum physics, a particle does not exist in the way classical physics observe it, with a definite physical location. Instead, it exists as a cloud of probabilities. If it comes into contact with its environment, as when a measuring operators observe it, then the particle loses superposition of multiple states. It collapses into a definite, measurable state, the state in which it was observed to start with. Penrose hypothesized that each time a quantum function collapses in this way in the brain, it gives her rise to a moment of conscious experience. If this quantum theory of consciousness tied to microtubules turns out to be correct, it could revolutionize our understanding of consciousness and even strengthen the trailblazing theory that at the quantum level, consciousness is capable of being in all places at the same time. In other words, it can exist everywhere, spontaneously, suggesting that your brain consciousness can hypothetically connect with quantum particles beyond your brain, maybe untangling with consciousness all across the universe. Consider. Is there a proof of a spiritual universe, according to Dr. Eben Alexander? He writes about his message in the very fundamental nature of reality and human experience, and covering the territory well beyond the question of whether or not some human experience or aspect of consciousness survives the death of the brain and body. Such knowledge, he says, is directly irrelevant to how we approach the life in many ways. It is a mistake to assume that proof of heaven is simply a clear-cut confirmation of the teachings of modern-day Christianity, and accusation from close-minded skeptics who, I am convinced, have not read the book, but rather are simply recoiling at the title. He continues to say, of course, my overall message greatly supported the teachings of Christ, which places love as the central guiding force and stresses to connectedness, which is through love, but is not limited to Christians alone. Many scientists believe that one's consciousness could span the entire universe. If human consciousness taps into or relies on the weirdness of quantum mechanics, then it is conceivable that it could spread the universe. When people talk about consciousness, we read, or the mind, it always is a bit nebulous. Whether we create consciousness in our brains as a function of our neurons firing, or consciousness exists independently of us, there is no universally accepted scientific explanation or where it comes from or where it lives. However, new research on the physics, anatomy, and geometry of consciousness has begun to reveal that it is possible. In other words, we may soon be able to identify a true architecture of consciousness. The new work builds up upon a theory. Nobel Prize-winning physicist Roger Penrose, B. Ph.D., and psychologist Stuart Hammer, M.D., first positive, in the 1990s, the orchestrated objective reduction theory, ORC-OR. Broadly, it claims that consciousness is a quantum process facilitated by microtubules in the brain's nerve cells, which could make sense. Since then, increasingly we believe that animals and birds manage to tip into the weirdness of quantum mechanics to help them navigate during their migrations in a field that is increasingly being referred to as quantum biology. They have suggested that consciousness is a quantum wave that passes through these microtubules, and that, like every quantum wave, has properties like superposition, the ability to be in many places at the same time, the quantum entanglement, the potential for two particles that are very far away to be connected. Thanks for the experts having questioned the validity of the ORC-OR, ORCH-OR theory. This is the story of the scientists working to revive it. Consciousness is the stuff existence is made of. Actually, you could say that consciousness is another name for the Almighty, says the author. God, or universal consciousness, is the source of all existence, according to the author, who says that existence consists of consciousness. Existence itself is made of consciousness, and existence has always been here, is here, and will be here in the future. Isn't this what Swamiji also says? But it existed before, exists today, and will exist tomorrow? Consciousness itself is the very foundation of all existence. Nothing is deeper than that. You cannot go beyond consciousness. You can only merge with it, become one with the mother. You can experience the source of all by going deeper and deeper into meditation, and you will realize that there is nothing deeper than meditation. You will find that everything comes out of consciousness. As it is said, even matter is condensed consciousness, and deep sleep, perhaps in a coma. There are degrees of consciousness. Man is the only being whose unconsciousness has allowed a little bit of consciousness to arise and to be awake. Currently, we are just a little less of our whole consciousness. Does it make sense? Good. The day it becomes all consciousness and no unconsciousness remains within you, a pure awareness of who you are from the beginning to the end, you will find that all questions have disappeared because you are in a state of knowing without questioning. You are consciousness itself, and you know that it is the source of everything. All the souls ultimately have to attain the same consciousness. Ultimately, everyone goes to the same source. Some go faster, with focus, without looking here and there. They know their destination and reach there too. Others jump a little here and there, and they go straight. But the door is never shut. You can always find your way back. That's a fact. Ultimately, we all merge with the universal consciousness, according to Borkar. Now, how do mortals communicate with spirits and other beings from elsewhere? Could it be as simple as a prayer, perhaps? How do spirits let their followers know what they want? Did they simply show up themselves or send an angel at some point and say, "Hey, write this down"? Do they just speak to a prophet occasionally? Why don't they do this all the time? Good question. Is the system more occult than that? Is communication between spirits and the great beyond even possible in this world? Communication would largely depend on who you are trying to communicate with and who you happen to be. For an average person, it is extremely difficult to just go out and talk, even with the weakest spirit. For these kinds of people, the only contact they will have is if a god or a spirit being chooses to speak with them. So it is said. I'm talking going through 20 proxies on 6 planets to send a note to a medieval blacksmith. Take it if you can seriously see us. For skilled people that are always, though, contacting a god, where there was no previous contact, must go through spirits. Accessing spirits can depend on your skills. A blacksmith can have a chance to contact an ember spirit if he knows how to take advantage of a spirit presence. This tiny spirit can then speak to a more powerful spirit who passes the message or request. The most powerful god is never reached to this way. Or anyway, he just sort of can't be reached now. That is very interesting to hear. Probably we can take it with a pinch of salt. People always tend to ask, how is that possible that the spirit channel reveals how to communicate with spirits? Think about it. What are the secrets to contacting spirits and connecting with the beyond? Another good question. A spirit medium said, talking about the ins and outs of contacting spirits, when she suddenly told me she was getting a message from my grandmother who passed away a few years ago. She said, "Your grandmother wants to say something to you." She says, as I'm taken off guard, she's telling me to ask you why you are not married yet. She really wants to see you married and settled down with a family. Let me tell you, I was shaken, says the author, but that is only because I was not familiar with the spirit world. When our loved ones pass, their spirit mingle in the spirit world, where we may be able to contact them. And their job is to guide that process. Well, not everyone believes in the existence of a spirit world, and there are a few things to understand before connecting with the afterlife, like what spirits are in the first place, and just as notably, what they are not. What are spirits? That's my question. Diving into spirit communication methods, it is important to fully understand spirits. Because when you are connecting with the afterlife, you should always know what should be awaiting on the other side. I read, there are such things as ghosts, says Gabriel. These types of spirits are usually the first things that people bump into, because they are stuck here on Earth place. Dwellers on Earth plane. She explains that the bumping into a feeling is essentially that energy you feel when you visit a historic place, or when you are in a place with undeniably supernatural vibes. Hear her out. She says, you should never ever be afraid of ghosts. They have a negative reputation, you know. The narrative that's constantly being reinforced in the scenery or in the scary movies is reflective of a cheaper, rare occurrence, according to Gabriel. You can get weird vibes, she says, and weird feelings from them, but they are harmless. Spirits who don't cross the other side after they die, so they're operating in the earth element, which is why you can communicate with them. Our spirit lives, or rather lives, on when we die. But we do see in instances where people have something that is really tearing them down to the earth, and so they get stuck here and cannot move on. Why do you want to contact spirits anyway? Besides the fact that you may just find it pretty down cool to connect with past loved ones. Hi, grandmother. You can also learn from certain spirits if you listen to their messages. There is so much more to the spirit world than just ghosts. And if you move through that fear, it's very beautiful. If you can elevate and quieten the mind, you start to connect with the higher vibration and the spirit world and get in touch with your loved ones. And that is where you get this amazing connection and beautiful energy that can assist you in your life and help you in healing. Understanding spirit guides. If you are hoping to communicate with the spirit, you may want to start with contacting your spirit guide. We are told that we come to Earth to learn. That is basically why we are here, she says. Spirit guides, which describes it as being highly evolved into essentially spatial helpers, guiding us through this journey. How to communicate with your spirit guides. One of the most common mistakes I can see people make when learning how to communicate with spirit guides is to look to the outside world. Instead, spirit guides connect you or with you in your intuition. When you go within your own spirit, your own self, and your own heart, you can cool down and listen to that connection with your spirit guides through you and into your voice, she says. You must ensure you are in the right mindset. Before attempting spiritual communication, it is emphasized that to set a clear intention and focus on the connection you want to make is important. Once you have your intention in mind, you can employ your method of choice for quieting distracting thoughts. Some days you will be in the right mindset and feel open to listening, and others you will not, and that is totally okay. What you don't want to do is force it. A great tip for beginners is to get a pen and paper and write down the feelings and thoughts you are having after you set the intention to connect. Another very important mediumistic tip for contacting spirits is your spirit communication method of choice. Probably shouldn't be anything you have seen in a movie, at least until you have had years of practice understanding and working with spirits. Listen to your dreams. One often overlooked medium tip is to pay attention to what you see while you are sleeping, because interdimensional communication can involve talking to spirits in your dreams. This can absolutely happen. Try a writing practice. Spirit-focused writing, meditations as automatic writing, as it is known, the kind you do without explicitly thinking about the words you are writing. Light a white candle, sit down, close your eyes, and take a deep breath, she instructs. Say that you'd like to work with highest operational guides available to you. And then you can ask them a question. Take a deep breath and relax your mind and your hand. Let it be loose. And then write up what they are saying. They'll start talking really fast. Just think about it. And this is how a medium who practices for many years contacting spirits speaks. There are many ways wherein spiritual communication can occur. Spirits may contact you through your dreams, usually shortly after someone has passed away, through angel numbers sometimes, and or through other surprising means, like a song stuck in your head. What about spirit or spirit communication and remote viewing? That is a subject. Remote viewing is often considered for its purpose in seeing into locations or existing physical assets that are otherwise not accessible from the past, present, and even the future. The missing aspect of remote viewing is the ability to visit a spiritual realm in the unseen frequencies and communicate with particular spirits. And it is like visiting someone in those realms. This can help answer your unsolved questions and give specific guidance needed to solve crimes and lives or life's big mysteries. All we need to do is ask and allow the answers to come through with a silent mind. The process is similar in tapping into the unified field, but rather than asking to see a particular target, it can be used to communicate with individual entities, including the deceased, extraterrestrials, and spiritual beings from other frequencies, including source, creator, like beings, or archons, angels, even demons, and similar, and even other species of ultra-terrestrials. Those without physical form. We can also have two-way communication with living humans, but between our greater eternal self, with consent. Remote viewing as a bridge to spirit communication. Now, traditional remote viewing protocols focus on perceiving physical locations or objects by accessing information beyond the constraints of space and time in the unified quantum field. However, this powerful consciousness technology can be expanded to serve as a method of communication with spiritual entities living in other dimensions or frequencies. Instead of visualizing a distant place, the remote viewer shifts their attention to listen or dialogue with spirits who hold the knowledge relevant to a crime or mystery. This approach transforms remote viewing from a passive observation tool into an active, interactive process. The viewer becomes a conduit for receiving guidance, insights, and confirmations from spiritual sources, where deceased individuals are connected to the keys, higher dimensional helpers, or even collective consciousness fields. The key is maintaining a quiet, open mind and clear intention, allowing the information to flow without interference from personal biases or expectations. How to use a remote viewing for spirit communication in crime solving. Set a clear intention. Begin by focusing on the specific question or problem you want to address. It helps to write the question down and simplify to see counsels for one question at a time. For crime solving, this might be identifying a suspect, understanding motives, or locating evidence. You cannot ask what is the missing link needed to solve the case. leave it to the detectives and the police. Clearly state your intention to communicate with helpful spiritual entities who can provide truthful and relevant information. Instead of seeking an image or visuals of a location, open yourself to receiving impressions in any sensory form, including words, feelings, symbols, knowledge, and direct messages and communication. You can even tap into the intentions behind humans on sight. Be receptive to whatever form the spirit's messages takes. You can ask to identify the relevant being to be sure of the credibility and to protect yourself. If you are unsure who is there, you can always ask if they are of the light to be sure. Record impressions without judgment. Document all impressions as they come, even if they seem unclear or symbolic. Avoid analyzing or filtering the information during the session to preserve its integrity. Leave it to the authorities. Seek ways for communication. Invite a response or clarification from the spirit. This can be done by mentally posing follow-up questions or requesting confirmation through signs or feelings. After the session, comparing information received with known facts or investigative leads, spiritual guidance often complements physical evidence, providing new perspectives or confirming suspicions. What to watch for discernment? Not all spiritual impressions are accurate or benevolent. Developing discernment through experience and grounding techniques helps differentiate truthful guidance from misleading or negative influences. Consent and ethics. Respect the autonomy of living individuals and free will of the spirits. Avoid intrusive or cursive questioning. Remember that if you are tapping into the consciousness of another living human, it is an important etiquette to only access their consciousness with express consent or for the good of all. If you are concerned about consent, you can ask to freely connect with another spirit team to communicate with you for the highest good of all rather than connect directly into their consciousness. Maintain emotional neutrality to prevent fear, hope, or bias from coloring the communication. Spiritual remote viewing should augment, not replace, traditional investigative techniques with law enforcement and forensic experts and shows a balanced approach. Keep that in mind also. It is lawful to use mediumship or remote viewing to initiate investigative state in Australia, but not for evidence in the court. The evidence discovered after mediumship insights is revealed is lawful, however. Best check the laws in your specific location of particular crimes or mystery you are trying to resolve. Find tuning your spirit connection. The spiritual world is hard to connect with us at our frequency range, but when we travel into higher states of frequency, we are more readily able to communicate with them. It takes hard work for both parties. You can communicate with a spirit to fine-tune processes between you and other established methods for shortcut answers. For example, when asked for yes or no answers during meditation, to be communicated as an X or Y to shortcut without misunderstandings, but understanding of remote viewing. Applications in crime solving, you can explore various articles and remote viewing. There are a number of them which are extremely useful. So far, what we have been considering, in line with the known factors, seemed to be reasonable to take note of, that there are scientific accounts to explain what consciousness is, based on observation. Remembering that these are considered findings to humanity's ardent tries to uncover some realism and explanation to the reality of the afterlife due to curiosity or stubbornness they all pursued. I believe the study of this particular science of consciousness, which could not be labeled or being nonsense or as impossible by any longer, seem to appear more resolved on scientific study without bias or religiosity today. This ongoing study, currently conducted, in fact without any bias, could now continue, and currently much more fundings would be needed. It certainly is a good thing to accept it as a university level study, especially within the bounds of the science of psychology, and that currently seems to pay its dividends. It certainly is good to know that there exists a consciousness-based understanding and studied within and being a part of the cosmos we all occupy. It is good to know that we are living in a time of enlightenment and discovery now. I thank you for sharing this experience with me. We shall meet once again by the next episode, for sure. In the meantime, keep happy, keep smiling, and thank you.